Good evening, and welcome to the February 10th meeting of the City of Kalamazoo Zoning Board of Appeals, a volunteer advisory board appointed by the City Commission. I would like to remind everyone that masks must be worn in City Hall and the City Commission chambers, regardless of vaccination status. Masks may be removed when addressing the Zoning Board of Appeals, but should otherwise be worn to cover the mouth and nose. The personal protection equipment located in the Commission chambers is available for use by those attending the meeting. In addition, attendees should take note of the reserved seat signs that are in place to create social distance. Public comments will be accepted during the times as indicated on tonight's meeting agenda. Community members that wish to provide public comments over the phone can call 888-382-9556. Again, that's number is 888-382-9556, and they can call in during the public comment period. They will enter a queue and will be prompted to offer their comments in turn. Callers will be commenting to the board live and will no longer be able to leave a recorded message. Mr. Eldridge, are there any announcements or changes to the original agenda?
Is that better?
No, your mic's not on, I don't think.
Aha, thank you. All right. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and start over. So as far as the changes to the agenda, item number 3, which is the case for 121 Fellows Avenue, the wording on that was reversed. So it is the first floor that is being proposed for the bed and breakfast in the duplex, and the second floor is the unit that's going to be owner occupied. The other item is number 4 regarding Stockbridge and Lake Street, and that is a variance request that, if approved, it will be valid for 18 months. So those are the only 2 changes to the agenda for tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Pete. We'll now move on to acceptance of last month's minutes. Are there any changes to the minutes? Hearing none, is there a motion for approval of the January Zoning Board of Appeals minutes?
I move to approve.
And is there a second? Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye. And opposed, same sign. Motion carries. I will now explain our procedure for tonight's public hearing. For each request, the secretary will read the application into the public record. The applicant or their representative will then have 10 minutes to provide their comments. Following that, the public is invited to step up to the podium, starting with those in favor of the application. Clearly state your name and address and present your comments within the 3-minute time limit. Following all comments from those who wish to speak in favor of the request, we will invite those who wish to speak in opposition or otherwise comment to do the same. Next, any call-in comments will be aired or received by the board and audience. After this, we will close the public hearing on the request. Once the public hearing is closed, the board will then conduct what is called a finding of fact, where the board states what they feel are the facts of the request. The board must approve the finding of fact. Therefore, the first vote you hear is not a ruling on the request, but on the finding of fact. Then the board discusses the request in order to determine a ruling. The board reserves the privilege to ask questions of persons who have already spoken, even though the public comment portion has been closed. Once discussion is ended, the board will move on to a roll call vote. A full board consists of 6 members, with 4 votes required to grant a non-use or a use variance. I'd now ask the secretary to read the first application into the record. Yep.
An application for a variance for provisions of the zoning ordinance has been filed with the Zoning Board of Appeals by Kalamazoo Neighborhood Housing Services for 114 and 120 Burr Oak Street in the residential multi-dwelling district RM36. The applicant is requesting a dimensional variance from Appendix A, Chapter 5, Section 5.1 of 2,635 square feet to authorize the dividing of 2 lots into 3 buildable lots. Each proposed lot will be between 3,078 square feet and 3,135 square feet, where 4,000 square feet is the stated buildable lot size for this zone district. Please note this request will not change the zoning classification of the property. This is a request for variance only regarding the item described above.
Thank you. On this case, I have a conflict of interest. As such, I will be leading the procedure for the public hearing, but I will not participate in the discussion or in the voting. I now invite the applicant to come up and present their case.
This is part of, should I start over? I wasn't sure if you guys could hear me.
Please start over.
Okay.
Yep, go ahead.
Thank you, everyone. My name is Matt Lazarek. This is Dara Smith. We're with KNHS Homeownership Services. As the application states, we're here seeking to get a variance to split 2 parcels into 3 on Burr Oak Street. KNHS has been involved in a multi-year partnership with the City of Kalamazoo and various other community partners building new construction infill housing. And our goal is to take these 2 lots and split them into 3 and put 3 homes on them instead of 2. And as such, we got into the minimum lot size being an issue. It is our intent to build a similar style home that is already on this street. We've built 2 on this street already, bordering each end of these 2 lots, and a third on the court behind it. Though this does require a variance, it is very similar in lot size to one of the homes that's already built to the east of it as well. So with that, we don't feel it would vary from neighborhood character or have any detriment to the area by accepting this variance. And really, that's probably about all we have to say on it. I know you guys have a lot of folks here tonight for some other requests, so I'll just keep it short and welcome any questions when that time comes as well.
Thank you. Are there any questions? No? Hearing none, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mr. Eldridge, would we like city comments before we move on to the public hearing?
Sure, I can add the city comments regarding this particular case. As was mentioned in the staff report, there was the background on the 2 properties. The lot width was identified at 37 feet of lot width for each one, and then the lot areas was identified for each of the two properties. This is the RM 36 zone district, which is a high-density residential zone district. And what we did looking around the area is looked at, the wide range of actual lot width and lot square footage in the Vine neighborhood. And, this reduction in the square footage of the lots is in keeping with the range that you see in the Vine neighborhood. Looking at the lots north on Fellows Avenue, lots in the 8 and 900 block along South Rose Street, and then, extending out further from that, there's also some courts in the Vine neighborhood, like Houston Place, Wall Street, and other blocks with smaller lots. In addition to that, staff had mentioned, how this proposal was in line with the Complete Neighborhoods goal of the strategic plan in relation to adding additional units to our housing stock, how the future land use map identifies this area as a neighborhood edge area, which allows for more density in the residential side, and also this proposal tonight is supported by the Vine neighborhood plan, which really emphasizes home ownership programs and increasing availability of dwelling units. And we did receive a letter of support from Steve Walsh, the executive director of the Vine Neighborhood Association. In addition to that, there were letters sent out to all property owners within 300 feet. And that was done actually December 23rd, because this was originally on the January agenda. So to sum it up, really staff does recommend support of this, and we are supporting it because it is, a minor dimensional variance of the lot area, which will allow the creation of taking the two lots and turning them into 3 buildable lots. And it is consistent with the development pattern of this area of the Vine neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you. I would now invite anyone in the audience who wishes to speak in favor of the application to please step up to the podium. Seeing none, I would now invite anyone that wishes to speak in opposition to also step up to the podium. Seeing none, are there any calls from
Hello, caller ending in 9275. You can speak. You have 3 minutes.
Yes, so my name is April Potgieser, and I reside in the county of Kalamazoo. And this is in reference to the flooding concerns that happen in whenever there's excessive rainfall, that basically floods all around Bronson Hospital, affecting Crosstown, Burdick, Stockbridge, Park, Vine, Jasper, John Street, and in turn it affects getting to the Bronson Hospital in a safe manner. This has been going on for years, and I feel that it should be addressed once and for all, because it's very important. Rather than getting development improved, for more housing and more buildings, it just seems like that just always gets shoved to the back burner. And I think it's really time to bring it to the front burner. I have witnessed over the last 2 years of listening to virtual meetings, Zoom meetings, that many people are very upset by this, and I know it's been going on longer than 2 years, but I really became aware of it, with people really concerned about it due to the fact of the Zoom meetings. Needless to say, I really think that the funds need to get there, however they get there, whether it be found through foundations or private, donations. I don't know if the COVID relief funds could even be tied into any of that. I'm not educated on that end of that, but this needs to get addressed because it's becoming a safety issue. And also for homeowners that are in the area as well, they don't appreciate having their homes flooded. And, the expense should not fall on them to repair the damage. And so it's a big ball of mess that needs to be dealt with once and for all. I thank you for your time, and I hope that you see the value in looking at this situation for the safety of the residents of the city of Kalamazoo, as well as people getting to and from the hospital that live in surrounding areas. Thank you.
Hello, caller ending in 8264. You have 3 minutes to speak.
Hi, I am wondering if it's possible to add another bus to the K Metro that drives on Westnedge. Currently there's only one, I believe, and it takes about an hour and a half to 2 hours to get just like a mile and a half away. So I was hoping that that could be something that could be worked on for those of us that aren't able to drive and need to rely on public transportation.
Ma'am?
Yes.
This is a public hearing regarding Burr Oak Street and a variance to, from lot size and lot width. If you can call back to the Planning and Development Office tomorrow and we can redirect your call to the Metro Transit line if you'd like.
All right.
Okay, thank you.
No more public comments.
There are no more comments. Very good. I'll now ask for that will close the public hearing portion of this, and I will now ask for a motion on finding of fact.
Yes, Chairman Logger. I move that the finding of fact for 114 and 120 Burr Oak Street shall include all information included in the public hearing dated December 23rd, 2021. 86 notices of public hearing were sent and 1 response was received and shall be part of the record from Steve Walsh, Executive Director of the Vine Neighborhood Association, who submitted a letter of support. The finding of fact shall include all those documents just described and also the facts and comments made during the public hearing, which are summarized as below. Matt M., the last name of which the spelling will be received by the recording and secretary, spoke on behalf of the application. They intend to build a similar style homes on these lots as are found in the neighborhood. The east neighboring lot has a lot size smaller than current zoning, as referenced. As stated by city staff, the proposed lot width would be 37 feet for these 3 new parcels, and are in line with other lot sizes in the vicinity. The property is zoned RM16, I believe, which is high density zoning district. City staff believes that the request fits with the city strategic plan, and the request is supported by both the Vine Neighborhood Association and the Vine Neighborhood Plan. April, whose last name the secretary in the recording will obtain, is a Kalamazoo County resident who has concern about flood issues in the area that could be exacerbated by the additional development.
Thank you. Is there a second on the motion for finding of fact? Jeremy, second. Any discussion? Any additions?
Is the concern, and I don't know if this should be directed to city staff or a conversation amongst us, but is the issue surrounding the flooding, the addition to more impervious surfaces that could exacerbate that issue? Is that a concern, like when the constituent called and asked about that? Is it just because the allocation of funds, or is it a concern for that becoming, because of the development, becoming an increased risk for flooding?
This is Pete Eldridge speaking. I would take those comments to mean that that citizen would like to see more investment by the city
I see. Okay.
in evaluating the flooding that's happened in the past in the area around Bronson Hospital.
Okay.
And I think she wants to make sure that it doesn't, it doesn't lose the attention of the city leadership.
I see. Okay, thank you.
All right, well, all those in favor of the motion, please signify by, please indicate by saying aye. And opposed, same sign. All right, the motion carries. Can we now have a motion on the application itself?
I make a motion for a dimensional variance from Appendix A, Chapter 5, Section 5.1 of 2,635 square feet to authorize the dividing of 2 lots into 3 buildable lots. Each proposed lot will be between 3,078 square feet and 3,135, where 4,000 square feet is the stated buildable lot size for this zone district.
Right, is there a second? Second from Jeremy. This is our opportunity for discussion.
I've had a chance to work with the residents that are in close contact, and I also own my home, which is less than 500 feet from the perspective. And I am in full agreement with KNHS that this will be a perfect infill situation and will help attenuate some of the tenancy issues that we're having with housing individuals. As far as the flooding goes, we know that there is a significant amount of infrastructure that's being done in the surrounding area, and not to totally negate the issue, but with the road work being done, they are laying down certain structures and systems that will help alleviate that stress that is noticed within the Vine neighborhood.
Mr. Chair, let me just remind the board to unmute your mics when you're speaking. I'm having trouble hearing over here whether the mics are on or not just because of the air handling. But just a reminder to use the button up front there. I know it's a little, it's a transition we're going through here. Yep, so yours is
Thank
live,
you.
okay.
Any further discussion?
I'll be in support of this development. I think it's amazing that we're continuing to build more housing in Kalamazoo. KNHS's mission to provide affordable housing for the residents of Kalamazoo. I'm in complete support of that. So I'll be voting now.
Thank you. Mr. Eldridge, can we have a roll call vote then?
We will start with Harrington,
Yes.
Doan,
Yes.
Vanden Hamburg,
Yes.
Carroll,
Yes.
Turpinning.
The motion carries. Will the secretary please read the next case into the record? Next case is 1000 West Kilgore Road. Your microphone's working good.
An application for a variance for provisions of the zoning ordinance has been filed with the Zoning Board of Appeals by Hackett Catholic Prep School for 1000 West Kilgore in the residential single-dwelling district RS5. And the applicant is requesting a dimensional variance from Appendix A, Chapter 7, Section 7.3A1, authorize the installation of a new 62-square-foot freestanding sign for the school, where the maximum sign size is limited to 46 square feet per the Zoning Board of Appeals variance granted in 2005. Please note this request will not change the zoning classification of the property. This is a request for variance only regarding the item described above.
Thank you. The applicant, please step forward.
Good evening. My name is Steve Vandersloot, and I work for Sign Art here in Kalamazoo. Fairly complete and fully explained, but just to revisit very quickly, Hackett was one of the first schools that Sign Art chose to use an LED reader board that was integrated within a cabinet. It was a strategy that we used to try and make things look streamlined. So we took these components with it, put it within our own cabinets, and it was manufactured from a company in Connecticut. Around 2008, I think we all remember what happened in this country. The company went out of business. They no longer supported the sign in terms of replacement parts. We had an outlet by which to repair it. We limped it along for probably 5 or so years after that, and it came to the point where it was more costly to maintain than they wanted to manage, so they simply shut it off. Well, they're tired of seeing the sign as it sits right there on the screen with the empty space. What we're attempting to do is to find the most logical means by which to update the sign. And what that is gutting out those electronic portions that you see in the red area, restoring that to a traditional cabinet, and then where you see the display board underneath where their slogan is, that's where the reader board would go. So it's the height maintains the same, the setback is the same, the structure is the same, even the identification cabinet's the same. We're just kind of working with what we have, and we feel that this is going to provide a good solution to Hackett. It's the background of it is mostly opaque, which is helpful. I know that LED displays get a bad rap from time to time, but that's usually user related, not necessarily the technology. And so it's my job as a professional to teach them that necessarily the brighter sign isn't the better sign, for example. And so I help them with establishing light levels from the day that the sign is installed. So as far as I understand from my conversations with Mr. Eldridge, that there hasn't been any community response to date, unless we have one that phones in this evening, and that the school has not received any communication over all these years of having a sign there, electronic and non-electronic, and it's always illuminated in one fashion or another. So if I can answer any questions for you, I'm here for you. If not, I'll take a seat.
Can you repeat your name?
Yes, my name is Steve Vandersloot with Sign Art.
Steve.
It's on the application.
Yeah, Vandersloot.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Are there any questions?
Yes, either for staff or the applicant, what is the specific nature of the 2005 variance?
Well, yeah, I can touch base on that. So the specific nature of the variance in 2005 was twofold. The first was an increase in the square footage from 32 square feet to 46, and then the height was increased from 6 feet to 8 feet. But it did not address the digital reader board or electronic display, because our 25% maximum standard was not in place at the time. So the current sign is technically out of conformance. It's roughly 40% of the sign area that makes up the digital display right now.
So the ordinance is 25, and we're currently at 40, and we're headed to?
We're headed back to 25. So they're increasing the fixed message portion of the sign and bringing down the changeable portion of the sign. So they're bringing that into conformance. However, it's, the overall sign size will be 16 square feet larger than it is now. So that's what triggered the need for this variance, was that additional 16 square feet. So they're going from 46 square feet to the 62 square feet.
I thought I heard the applicant say the height is the same,
Correct.
so the width must be changing?
We're going downward.
Further down?
Yeah. Yep. The comparison's pretty solid. It's to proportion. Again, we're changing that area between the columns below the red display where the more than high school in the website is listed, and that's where the location of the LED display is. So it's dropping down. It's only going to be roughly a foot above grade, so it's going to be fairly low.
And do I understand that the LED is increasing or decreasing?
The percentage in comparison to the overall sign.
I'm worried, I'm sorry to interrupt.
Yeah.
I would like to know if the area of the digital sign is increasing or decreasing.
Offhand, I don't recall. It's very, very close. Very, very close.
Thank you.
Yep.
Can I clarify? I would like to understand also, are you increasing the size of the sign you're increasing the size of the sign in terms of the proportionality of the LED component of it, which will now make it 25%, but in its current state, it's 40%. But because the proportionality is going to increase, it will go back to being in compliance. Is that a way to understand it?
You have it correct.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any additional questions for the applicant?
If it was in compliance, why would you be here?
It's the overall area is the overall sign area is where the deviation is. It exceeds what was approved from the previous.
By going down.
By going down.
The percentage going down, but the overall area is larger, so it's like starting over.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you, Mr. Vandersloot. Are there any staff comments on this one, Mr. Eldridge?
Yes, I do have a few comments to make regarding this. I just wanted to reference the size of the Hackett Catholic Prep School campus, which comes in at almost 30 acres, and they have roughly 1,100 feet of frontage on both Duke Street and West Kilgore. This is in the RS-5 residential single dwelling district. So we obviously are very mindful of any sign approvals in this zone district. In this particular circumstance, there's one primary entrance to the school, so they don't have any sort of signage on the Duke Street frontage. It's just this one large sign on the West Kilgore Street frontage. The other thing to note when I was doing my research is the speed limit on Kilgore is 35 miles per hour, so it's definitely a more heavily traveled and faster speed roadway. And given the size of the campus and the speed limits and the traffic volumes and the positioning of the sign, we didn't really register any concerns with that. We did send out, as Mr. Vandersloot made mention, notices went out to the surrounding property owners within 300 feet, and we did not receive any comments back regarding those notices that were released. As far as what this area is zoned for, looking at the future land use map, it is still low-density residential. However, schools, both public and private, are definitely, part of what makes up a complete neighborhood. That's where you typically find schools, is near the residential population. So, it's not like the use is out of place, but it's definitely always a challenge trying to match the sign standards to, these, this use category when it's in a residential zone, and it is it takes up a large amount of land and has a very large footprint of a building. So, with those reasons being stated, staff is in support of this, which will allow the reuse of the existing sign frame that's there. Also, the sign will not be any taller than it currently is. As Mr. Vandersloot mentioned, the sign is actually going to extend down closer to the ground, so they're not elevating it any further into the air than it already is. It's not going to be positioned any closer to Kilgore Road. It's going to stay right where those two posts are. So that is the reason the staff is supportive of this minor variance for the 16 square feet.
Thank you. We'll now open it up to the public hearing portion. Any audience members in favor of the application are invited to please step forward, sign in, state your name.
I'm Richard Stewart. I just wanted to speak in total support.
Can you
impressed that the school. I'm Richard Stewart. I'm a resident of the city, 30 years, and I just wanted to express my complete support, and I am very just happy that the school chose a local business with local jobs. I think it's nothing but a benefit for the area. I know I have a digital sign. I received many compliments from my neighbors after putting it up. So there's a lot of benefit, brings a modern feel. So I just totally support this. Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no one else in favor, is there anyone in opposition? Please step forward.
I think we should take down all signs and not allow any form of communication in the city whatsoever. I'm just kidding.
Can you start by stating your name, though?
The Open Meetings Act says that you cannot force an individual to disclose their name, so I'm going to choose not to. But there is no public notice for this meeting outside. And I called 311 today to ask if there were any public meetings, and they said no. And I was forwarded to the city staff through email and writing, and there was no public meetings today. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Sir, what's your name? Oh, you don't want to tell us your name? Okay, sorry.
I would invite anyone else wishing to speak in favor or opposition. Please step forward. Seeing none, can we open it up to anything from the phone?
No public comments via phone.
And there are none from the phone. With that, we will close the public hearing, and I would ask for a motion for the finding of fact.
Okay, I might need a little support again. Okay. I move that the finding of fact for, just go into it? Okay, Thank you. I move that the finding of fact for 1000 West Kilgore Road, shall include all information included on the notice of public hearing dated January 26, 2022. There were 196 notices of public hearing that were sent out, and 0 responses were received and are part of the record. A public hearing was held before the board, and public comments were accepted. There was one comment that was in support of this case from Richard Stewart, who is a longtime resident of Kalamazoo, who was very supportive of the sign and was happy that the Hackett utilized a small local business that could be supportive of the Kalamazoo economy. And then there was one statement from a constituent that was in opposition who wanted to remain nameless and was not happy that there was not a notice that was outside, and was upset about that and felt as though that should not be how it is, and stated that at this hearing today. In addition to the information and documents contained in the agenda packets that the staff provided for this request, the Zoning Board of Appeals received additional documents on the request, including a staff report, a public notice, the one that was sent out to the 196 humans, an application, the review sheet, the image of the existing sign, the image of the proposed signage, the meeting minutes from the 2005 Zoning Board of Appeal meeting, and the zoning map. The finding of facts shall include these documents just described, and also the facts and comments made during the public hearing, which are summarized as follows. And I think I was supposed to say the comments that were shared in this component of it, but the Hackett Catholic School, prep school, embodies approximately 30, this is directly from the staff report, embodies approximately 30 acres of an 1,100 feet of frontage on both Duke Street and Kilgore Road. The parcel is in the residential single dwelling district. On July 14, 2005, the Zoning Board of Appeals granted a dimensional variance for 46 square feet of a freestanding sign with special uses in the RS5 district, where only 32 square foot signage, was allowed. The reasons are provided in the 2005 Zoning Board meeting minutes, and the reasons and the rationale for that were to provide better visibility for the main entrance and the higher than normal traffic areas. The proposed sign now will be constructed on the existing support post. The sign setbacks and the structure and the sign itself will be similarly constructed, if not the same. And now the proportionality as it relates to the LED lights will be proportionate, because at this point it's 40% and the ordinance outlines that it needs to be 25%. The strategic vision is in alignment with this signage, and the use is to inform the community, and that's a part of this community engagement strategic vision alignment. Staff is in support of this change, and let me see what else I wrote up here. I think that's it. Yeah, that's it. Is that okay?
Yep.
All right, thank you.
Is there a second on the motion? Right, any additions or changes? I think we got it. Will all in favor of approval of the motion on finding of fact signify by saying aye?
Aye.
And opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Could we now have a motion on the application itself?
I make a motion for a dimensional variance from Appendix A, Chapter 7, Section 7.3A1, to authorize the installation of a new 62-square-foot freestanding sign for the school, where a maximum size is limited to 46 square feet per the Zoning Board of Appeals variance granted in 2005.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Discussion.
I don't know if this is the appropriate time. The staff and the attorney will tell us, but this gentleman has brought up a potentially serious issue. I remember that a couple of years back, the board and I attended, a few of us attended a board educational seminar at the Upjohn Institute, was it, Pete, maybe? And I don't remember everything there, but one thing that I do recall, but not in specifics, is that there must be notice for public meetings. And if this gentleman has raised a concern, then I think that the attorney should address it and tell us if we're in good legal standing for this meeting. Because I don't want to waste the applicant's time before us or after this if this is not an official meeting. And I don't want anybody on the board to be in a potentially tough situation if this is not an official meeting. So I think that should be addressed before we move on.
Well, Mr. Carroll, I'd like to start by saying that, part of the steps in following the Michigan Planning and Zoning Enabling Act is sending out notification to the surrounding property owners within 300 feet of the subject property, a minimum of 15 days prior to the meeting date. So that's the first step. The second step is a public notice in a local newspaper of circulation. That was also done and confirmed with the Kalamazoo Gazette. The third step is we notify the clerk's office so they can electronically put that on the website as far as meeting notices and keep folks apprised. Fourth, it is identified on the meeting calendar for this room, the City Commission chambers, that this meeting is occurring. So what I do need to look into is, there are other meeting notices downstairs inside City Hall near the rear entrance. Now, there isn't anything posted on the outside of the building, but there is a whole listing of public notices down there near the rear entrance, and so it's typically there and on the website. So those are the things that I need to follow up on. I don't know if Attorney Bear would like to add anything further.
Okay. I think Pete has reviewed the requirements of the statute and the ordinance so far as notice. The record reflects that the minimum requirements for notice for a public meeting have been met. Now, the city it does do additional things, having what Pete wants to review as far as having the meeting schedules, what public meetings there are at the entrance and so forth. There isn't a requirement legally in either the Zoning Enabling Act or the Code of Ordinances to have something posted outside. So the minimum requirements have been met to hold a public meeting. This is a valid public meeting.
Thank you. Thank you. Yep. So with regard to the motion itself, I'm going to be in favor of this motion. I think that Mr. Eldridge pointed out what I think is the special circumstance in this case. While this street is zoned residential, what we have is a private school on a large lot that does need some signage, or that, customarily would have some signage. In this case, there's been a prior variance granted. This variance today, while it increases the size of the sign, it does bring the digital portion in conformance with the new zoning code. In addition to that, I think it very sensitively keeps the width and the height of the sign the same and increases the size by going down, which doesn't change any sight lines. Visually, I think the sign is very similar to what was there before, and as such, I don't think it will adversely affect any adjacent landowners in any material way. So I will be in favor. Any further discussion? Hearing none, can we have a roll call vote?
And we'll start with Mr. Turpinning.
Yes.
Carroll.
Yes.
Lager.
Yes.
Vanden
Yes.
Doan.
Yes.
Harrington.
Yes.
The motion carries. Thank you. Right. Will the secretary please read the next case into the record?
An application, this is Fellows, right?
Yep.
An application for variance for provisions of the zoning ordinance has been filed with the Zoning Board of Appeals by Dan Bannigan for 121 Fellows Avenue in the Residential Multi-Dwelling District, RM36. The applicant is requesting a dimensional variance from Appendix A, Chapter 12, Section 12.3, to authorize a variance to allow a bed and breakfast to operate, allowing a bed and breakfast operation on the ground floor, was it?
Yes.
Ground floor of the duplex where principal residence of the operator is on the second floor unit. The zoning ordinance states the owner or operator is to reside in the same dwelling unit as the bed and breakfast. Please note this request will not change the zoning classification of the property. This is a request only for this is a request for variance only regarding the item described above.
Thank you. In this case, I have a potential conflict of interest. As such, I will refrain from both voting and participating in any discussion, but I'll just simply lead the procedure for the public meeting. And I invite the applicant to please step forward and present your case.
Good evening, everyone. Thanks for your time tonight. So as you heard, my request is to allow me to operate a bed and breakfast in the lower floor of my duplex while I occupy the upstairs unit. And the way that the zoning ordinance is worded, makes my situation a bit unrealistic to operate a bed and breakfast. Like me residing in the same unit that I'm renting, that would be about 1,100 square feet compared to the total building size of 2,200 square feet. And allowing this, I would still be able to maintain the same oversight, which I understand to believe is the intention of the zoning ordinance, with the owner-occupier being in the same dwelling unit. And I actually began this operation in October, so I've kind of had like a realistic trial period to understand if this has had any impact on my neighbors. So I spoke to them in the last couple weeks, and I approached them all the same way, starting at asking if they have noticed that I've been renting my place to various people throughout the last few months. And a couple of them said yes, and then one of them said, no, I didn't even have any idea. And then I went on to ask them if this had like caused any inconvenience for them, or if they had any concerns about it, and they all said no. And all of them were kind of, happy for me and what I'm doing, and encouraged me to keep going and gave me their support. We have from 3 of those neighbors that's documented. I did also reach out to Steve Walsh, unfortunately not early enough. I got an email back from him just a few hours ago. I'm not sure if that was able to be included in the notes or not. But he did say that he wasn't able to give a letter without speaking to the board of directors. But he did say that he thought it'd be a great addition to Fellows and that it was appropriate for the neighborhood. And then lastly, I'd just like to share some personal experience that I've had over the last 4 months doing this, and that it's been very fulfilling to me to be able to offer a clean, comfortable, homey place for it right in the middle of our community for those outside of our community to stay here for whatever purpose. And a few of those people I had a family come for a week from Arizona to visit family. I had a family from Colorado come for 4 nights also to visit family. I had a family from Georgia come for 4 nights to visit their newborn grandson. And I had 2 med students stay for 25 nights to do clinical rotation at Bronson. And I feel that being able to offer, this is a unique offering that I have, and you know, all these people have told me that they're very appreciative of the space, and you know, it kind of meets all their needs of, you know, having a place to cook and a couple separate bedrooms to maintain privacy with the family, and a full bathroom, living area. And it suits their needs better than, you know, traditional offerings. So I think that overall it's a positive thing for the neighborhood and the community. And I will open it up to questions from you all. Thank you.
How do you market this B&B?
On Airbnb?
On Airbnb?
Yeah, the website.
And you make the breakfast?
No.
Who makes the breakfast?
The wording of the ordinance is the service of one or more meals a day. And in conversations that I had with Jared, I'm not sure if Pete and I discussed this, but he indicated that, you know, prepackaged meals would be appropriate in addition to coffee and tea.
So I could rent my house out Airbnb and give somebody an Oreo in a package, and I'm a B&B? Is that what I can do that at my house?
Not necessarily. You know, first of all, you got to be in the right zone district. So this is a multi-dwelling zone district versus a single dwelling zone district.
Okay.
You know, I mean, we are looking at them as stocked. You know, the rooms are stocked with food and dishware and so forth, so that they, you know, that they do have food available.
When I went to Airbnb in other places, they had food available for me. I didn't realize I was staying at a bread and breakfast. So I'm struggling with the practical difference between an Airbnb short-term rental, which has come before this board and we've said no, and this situation. He's not in the dwelling. And I get it. I was supportive on the surface when I saw this. Sounds like a great idea. You're running a B&B, not an Airbnb, and you're right there. It makes sense, but it's marketed on Airbnb. It's an Airbnb, and these people have voted against Airbnbs just in the last year. So I don't know, and I'm sure they offered water and Oreos and all those other things that you're going to be offering. So what's the difference?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I'd say the big difference is the on-site management of what's going on. So whether it's food or it's fresh towels and sheets.
Yep. Or
it's questions for the operator as far as, hey, we're looking for a restaurant to eat at tonight. But with you know, a bed and breakfast as it's defined, you know, the owner or operator needs to reside, you know, well, and that's what we're here for, is the definition says reside in the detached dwelling. And in this case, the individual's in the same building, but he's technically in a separate dwelling.
So if the board will remember, 6 months ago, a fine couple came before this board and they had a duplex just behind off of West Main, behind Little Caesars, in that duplex area. Fixed it all up, spent a lot of money like yourself. And they didn't phrase it as a B&B, they just phrased it as a short-term rental. It was denied. And so I'm struggling with, we voted on that, and if we're not consistent, what I'm trying to do is, I'm supportive of you, but that's not my job. My job is not to be supportive of you. My job is to do the best thing for the community and be consistent with our decisions, no matter how much I like your idea. So I just have to say that. I'm trying to reconcile what's the difference between that one and this one, other than the word or the acronym B&B. That's what I'm trying to get at here.
Okay, and I can also add that other situation you're referring to that was before the board and was denied by the board, that was in the residential duplex zone district. So again, it wasn't in a multi-dwelling zone district. This happens to be RM36, which is a high-density multi-dwelling zone district. So, you know, those circumstances were, you know, different, less intense residential zone. B, they wanted, they were looking for a variance for a short-term rental so that it was hands-off, that they could, you know, have an individual just show up and open up the lockbox and stay in the unit, and, you know.
So, Mr. Applicant, are you there when they show up every time?
I believe I have been there every time.
I believe you. Okay. Doesn't seem any different. The zoning, I don't understand how it's different. I get how zoning is different, but there's not going to be any more people in this guy's house as there was going to be in those other people's houses. And I get it that there's different zoning, but it seems like B and B is what we're...
Well, procedurally, I wonder if that might be better left to the discussion portion of this. Are there further questions for the applicant tonight?
Are you like right, you know where Vandersalms is? Are you in that vicinity?
Yeah, just up the hill
Yep,
from
okay,
Vandersalms.
I thought so.
across
So
from
you're
Joe.
right by the hospitality house, right by Vandersalms, right in that, it's like that little
Correct.
street.
Yeah,
right there.
there's commercial properties right there. end of
Okay.
the street.
And how many other how many other homes are on your street about? Like owner occupied homes, let me ask that.
Owner occupied, 3 currently.
3?
Yeah.
Okay, and then
Pending more, there's 2 available houses there.
there's 2 vacant homes on your street?
Yes.
And then are there rentals on your street also?
Yes, one of the properties, 111 Fellows, I believe, is a rooming house.
I'm sorry?
A rooming house.
A rooming
is
house?
what my
Okay.
other neighbors have told me it functions as. I've seen many people come and go from there
Sure.
during my time living there.
All right, thank you.
What does the parking situation look like for your
I don't-
bed and breakfast?
I don't think your mic's on.
Jeremy, can you press down?
What is what does the parking situation look like for your bed and breakfast?
There's plenty of room in my driveway for 4 cars, like 2x2 and 2 deep. So each unit can kind of have a row of 2 cars to get in and out.
So I live in the Vine neighborhood. So if I understand it correctly, you own a double wide parking space that can accommodate for the top unit and the bottom unit separately?
Correct. It's in the picture here. Well, the top 2 pictures.
You're at an extreme disadvantage. You're talking to the only blind guy on the board. But I appreciate that you do explain that. Thank you.
And I did send Pete a copy of the survey from my neighbors in this like purple house here, to the east of mine, and it shows that the property line is on that like row of bricks. Am I
Very good.
allowed to make any additional comments in general?
Nope. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Pete, would you like to make staff comments at this point?
Let me make a few comments. First of all, to answer the question, there is a rooming house. I believe it's owned by Kalamazoo County Housing Choices. That's further down Fellows towards South Burdick. And that is in a commercial zone district. So Fellows is RM36 until you get within so many properties of the intersection of South Burdick, and then it transitions to commercial. So you've got a few houses that are in that commercial zone right there. So, but I do want to mention that, yeah, this was brought to the attention of our zoning inspector, and that is Jared Chambers. And Mr. Bannigan worked with Jared on what the ordinance requirements were and what he was trying to do, and then that's how he was put in touch with me to talk about, if a variance was appropriate here. And, I looked back at, other circumstances that have been before the board. And I'm still at a loss for if that was Winchester Place, maybe, where the duplex was in the RD19 zone district. But that was north of West Main. But the examples in the staff report that are mentioned on South Rose Street and then another one on West Dutton, both of those circumstances that have been before the board for a variance from the definition of the bed and breakfast are in the same RM36 zone district as the applicant tonight. And so one of those was the owner/operator resides in the house that's next to the house that also serves as an extension of the bed and breakfast. The other circumstance on West Dutton, there's 3 structures that make up the bed and breakfast operation. So the operator lives in one of the 3 structures. And so slightly different, but, in this case, this is actually less of a variation from the definition because it's technically in the same structure. It's just a different unit in the same structure. So, but it's, the wording of the ordinance, talks about, a bed and breakfast being located within a detached house that is the principal residence of the operator. And that is, that is really the definition is what we're working with here. It's something that's under review, just like the allowance of short-term rentals in the city of Kalamazoo. How do we accommodate for more of these types of uses, especially as as tourism starts to come back online. But in addition to the staff narrative, I did note under the strategic goals, the alignment with the complete neighborhoods, and made reference to, providing lodging, another form of lodging in Kalamazoo. This zone district, as mentioned, is a more intensive residential zone district, which aligns with the future land use map. And then the Imagine Vine neighborhood plan does support increasing housing options. So, these are just all forms of housing options are out there. And this is just one of them, obviously more of a temporary lodging type. On the engagement side, in addition to the letters that we sent out, there was noted 3 letters of support received from 115, 124, and 125 Fellows Avenue. And Mr. Bannigan made reference to Executive Director Steve Walsh from the Vine Neighborhood Association. I did read the email. He did sound supportive of the request, but made it very clear that he had to run it by the Vine Neighborhood Board before he could actually produce any sort of letter of support. So that's kind of where that one was left off. So and I think I've already touched on the point many times about this being a duplex, so I'm not going to go back into that. But I guess I would, sum it up by indicating that this is a similar use variance to others granted in the same RM36 zone district, and in fact, in the same neighborhood, the Vine neighborhood, and staff is supportive of this. Thank you.
Thank you. I would now invite anyone in the audience who wishes to speak in favor of this motion to please step forward.
Good evening. I just want to clarify the record. I did not speak against the last one. I was just a neutral statement. I do remember a few of these that you guys have talked about in the past. I think there was another gentleman that had multiple houses, like smaller houses that were very close to each other. And I think that one got denied too. I was always rooting on my couch while I was watching you guys on the TV. I think if somebody owns the house, they should be able to do what they want with it. But I feel that way about all of them, so obviously that doesn't mean a lot to what you guys are doing right now. But I do find it interesting, if he sold this house to me tomorrow, could I do this with the house? It stays with the house then? So the property value is going to increase. I find that interesting, especially depending on what the neighborhood is like. I live on the north side of North Street. Bought my house for $10,000. What a deal. You cross the street, they start at like $180,000. I couldn't afford to pay the property taxes across the street from where I live with the income I have. I live in a poor neighborhood because I'm poor. I can afford my property taxes. If the property next to me doubled and my property taxes went up, it would be a burden on me. I would have to find a poorer neighborhood. So there's pros and cons. What he's doing, I'm like, yeah, do whatever you want with your house. But then there's another part of me that's like, oh, that's going to affect me too. So thanks for all your work. And I do just want to say I'm really disappointed that you're saying we met the minimum standards. It makes me want to walk in here in a thong with some pasties on and say I've met the minimum standards for wearing clothing. Please don't be disturbed by my effect on your world. They put those signs up outside because I kept coming up to the second floor where they used to be posted right here, and they didn't want me to come on the second floor anymore because I'm too excited. And then they started putting up these signs down here. So they put up the signs outside so people could get public notices outside. I just want to let the staff know here tonight, there used to be a calendar on the website. It was so convenient. I could just be like, what public meetings are there today? Oh, that's really interesting. I want to go to the tree committee. Oh, it was canceled again. But now that calendar is gone. It would be awesome if we could get that back.
Thank you. I would now invite anyone that wants to speak in opposition to the application to please step forward. Seeing none, are there any telephone calls to?
No calls at this time.
No calls? Then we will close the public hearing portion of this, and I'd ask for the motion of finding of fact.
I move that the finding of fact for location 121 Fellows Avenue shall include all the information included in the notice of public hearing dated January 26, 2022. 81 notices of public hearing were sent and 3 responses were received and are part of the record. The 3 letters in support are from 115 Fellows, 124 Fellows, and 125 Fellows Avenue. The finding of fact shall include those documents just described, as well as also the facts and comments made during the public hearing, which are summarized as follows. Dan Bragganigan spoke in favor, is in the same building, merely on another floor of a duplex. Current rules do not allow. Feels it meets overall intent of the ordinance. Has no known neighbor opposition. Differences between this and another case denied is case 1 was more hands-off and in a lower density area. Current case has sufficient parking. Staff comments, other variances granted. 1 was in the same situation of another part of a building. Case 2 was operators lived in one of the 3 B&B buildings. Definition of a B&B is under review. Citizens spoke in favor of the idea that a person should do what they like with their home, but is concerned about the effect on property taxes. Suggested master calendar return to website for public meetings. And that's all I have.
Thank you. Is there a second to the motion of finding of fact.
It's really hard to not get
I
bogged down in
second.
detail.
Oh,
You know.
we got Beth Vanden Hamburg seconded it. All in favor of the motion signify by saying aye,
Aye.
and opposed, same sign. Motion carries. And I'd now ask for a motion on the application.
I make a motion for a dimensional variance from Appendix A, Chapter 12, Section 12.3, to authorize a variance to allow a bed and breakfast operation in the ground floor of the duplex where the principal residence of the operator is in the second floor unit. The zoning ordinance states the owner or operator is to reside in the same dwelling unit as a bed and breakfast. Please, that's all I have to read, sorry. Long day.
Go ahead.
The zoning ordinance states the owner-operator is to reside in the same dwelling unit as the bed and breakfast. We'll stop.
Thank you. Is there a second on the motion?
I'll second.
For the second. Now it's our time for discussion.
Well, I'm going to be voting in favor of this because, to be consistent with the number of other approvals that we've made and the fact that it's in a different zone district. But I do find it imperative that the city complete expeditiously a review of this ordinance because it keeps coming up just like the ground floor units in a, the other one, can you help me with the
In the multifamily.
the multifamily. So I haven't seen that finalized, and it's been about 2 years, and this one is now haunting us. I'm in favor. I agree with this gentleman. You should be able to do what you want with your house. I want a tiny house in the back, my backyard, so I can rent it out too. Honestly, I do want that, and I think people should be availed to that option. But we have to be consistent in our voting, and that's what I'm trying to do here, is be fair to everybody. So I'm going to be voting in approval, but I find it kind of weird that we hear about this housing crisis all the time. We've heard about it tonight, okay? But we're renting out these places to people from California and Arizona. But we have a housing crisis. So how come we aren't renting these things out to the people who are in crisis in our own community? So it kind of makes the argument, and not this gentleman's, but it makes the global argument a little bit fishy for either the housing crisis or short-term rentals. That doesn't reconcile. What does reconcile is the highest amount of money that one can make from their property, whether an individual or a corporation. It's always money. And I wonder if we have a shortage of hotel rooms in our community. Thank you.
So I've got about the same feeling for this. I'm voting in favor of it, just despite the city for not moving in a timely manner on this, because it is not the first time I've heard of it, it's not the first time the city's heard of it. Every bed and breakfast I've ever stayed at, the meals prepared in the morning, and I expect that. That was one of the base requirements that was not met by the previous applicant, and we denied them outright. I think that the city needs to be more advantageous and more timely in the handling of this. And as it is in the neighborhood in which I am the chairperson, I think it would be advantageous of me to vote in favor of this as a ongoing measure to support my community.
I am going to be voting in favor of this. And while I understand the concerns with the bed and breakfast and some of the issues with the applicant on Windsor Place that we voted down last year, I feel confident in my vote for yes because this is an RM 36 district. So to my way of thinking, there's a huge difference between the housing, the requirements, the district, what's going on in this at Fellows Avenue versus the Westwood neighborhood, where you turn down Turwell Lane, you go back one block to turn left to get to Windsor Place, and you're surrounded by a sea of single family homes. So I was very comfortable. It broke my heart. I was comfortable last year voting no. And I am comfortable this year voting yes. I feel like we're comparing apples to oranges. And I don't want to see the city or my record or as stomping on somebody's dream from last year, that lovely couple that came, and, it was a heartbreaking no. And I don't feel that the two are the same.
I'm going to be voting yes for this, like I voted yes for last year as well. And it's because of the same reason. That couple last year, what prompted me to vote yes for them was because of their proposed use, which they had aging parents. And as someone who is a part of the sandwich generation myself, as I'm rearing my own child, and I had an ailing parent who now has transitioned, I understood the need for the capacity to be able to make supplemental income, in addition to having the autonomy and option in my dwelling to be able to oversee and care for my parent. And so the issue for me is, it's not to spite the city, but just to expand the vocabulary for how we care for one another, just like with what you're saying, Mr. Carroll, in terms of, we have a housing crisis, but the way that we're constructing, and even what this gentleman said surrounding the way that we're managing our municipality and the way that we do things, there's a human-centered design component of the way that we're interpreting the legislation that is absent from how, like, the needs of the community and the constituency that need to be reconciled. And so I would like to encourage us to be able to do that. So I will be voting yes for this because I think that people need flexibility, autonomy, and options to be able to utilize their housing, to be able to make supplemental income, to be able to do what they got to do. And I thought that last year, I think it now, and y'all gonna have to walk down the street to go get something to eat, okay? Now, that's that.
I should correct myself. It's not to spite the city. That was the incorrect term I tried to use. It is really to encourage them to light the fire underneath all of these seats, to start things moving, as I feel it's way too stagnant to be a progressive city without progressive movement.
You could spite the city. I be spiting the city sometime. Okay. We love our city, but we could be spite them. We could spite them.
Thank you, Jeremy.
Very good. I'd ask for a roll call vote.
We'll start with Ms. Doan,
Yes.
Vanden Hamburg,
Yes.
Turpinning,
Yes.
Carroll,
Yes.
Harrington,
Yes.
Motion carries. Thank you. I'd now ask the secretary to read our fourth case into the record, please.
An application for a variance for provisions of the zoning ordinance has been filed with the Zoning Board of Appeals by Kalamazoo County Housing Choices for 210, 216, 220, 302, 302 rear, 308, 308 rear, 316 Lake Street / 205 and 209 East Stockbridge Avenue, which are situated in Use Zone CC Commercial Community Districts, Zone ZN1 Commercial Neighborhood District, and N1 Manufacturing Limited District. The applicant is requesting a use variance from Chapter 4, Section 4.2, Q3 to allow residential dwelling units on the ground floor level of each of the proposed apartment buildings, 60 residential units total, where retail or other commercial floor space is required on the ground floor. Please note that this is a renewal of the same variance granted December 10th, 2020, which has expired. Please note this request, it will not change the zoning classification of the property. This is a request for variance only regarding the item described above.
Thank you. I now invite the applicant to please step forward and present your case.
Hold up.
I don't think it,
There we go.
Do you hear me now?
Sorry
yep,
about that.
Okay.
there it is.
I'll try it again. My name is Lisa Wilcott. I'm from the Lift Foundation. Lift Foundation is currently the only nonprofit multifamily housing developer in the county of Kalamazoo. We've presented this a couple other times, as you well know. The project is a project that is in line with the Imagine Kalamazoo 2025 plan, which calls for affordable housing adjacent to the downtown area. Our project fulfills that. The site plan has been approved in the past. We are reapplying for site plan approval as well. And there are some other changes that have occurred since that time, including this area being put in the natural features protection overlay. So some of the features that you've seen before, which entailed water retention that was on the surface, the NFP will draw that underground. So I know in the past it's been a concern with the northern portion of the property, the Lake Street properties, that they were, they're in a flood zone. Those portions of the property really will only be used for a walking path. And that walking path will be determined on site in order to disturb the least amount of trees as possible. So other than that, most of the project is pretty much the same. We plan to apply for tax credits in October, so we're trying to give ourselves enough lead time to get all the tasks completed. I think that's really all I have to say. You've got the packet and the information, and again, not much has changed since you heard this the last two times, so I'm open to any questions that you might have.
So just to refresh myself, as I understand it, the ground floor will both have residential, as you're proposing, and a child care center.
Correct. Yep. And so there are two buildings. One is perpendicular to Stockbridge, and that will have no commercial on the first floor, except for like our office and our community center. And then along Stockbridge, there's a two-story building, and that first floor will have the frontage area be a daycare to serve residents of the community, not just in the apartment dwellings, but also it's open to anyone in the community.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Are there other questions for the applicant? Yep.
So you've come before the board 3 times for you said 3 times?
This is the third time.
This is
yes.
the third.
Yeah.
For what though? And what happened?
What happened? So the primary funding for the development for this project will be low-income housing tax credits, which we've applied for through the Michigan State Housing Development Authority. And I don't know if you're familiar with that process, but it usually takes several times. We're hoping the third time is the charm, but it's been more times sometimes for Lift Foundation for its other developments. So that time passes and these things expire with the city, so that's why we're reapplying for, basically renewing this variance.
So I'm familiar with the Lift Foundation. So what are the other properties that are under your purview currently?
The other communities that Lift has developed?
Yes.
Azure Heights, which is in Kalamazoo Township, and that's a 10-unit property. It serves only persons with a specific disability. There are 2 other properties that are like that. One is on Douglas Avenue. It was a rehab in '93, and that serves persons with disability. It's 20 units. And then Gladys Street Apartments in Portage, a 10-unit disability a property that serves persons with disabilities. Interfaith Homes of Kalamazoo, which is a 200-unit property on the north side of Kalamazoo, right next to the Versus Dickinson ball field. and neighborhood apartments is rented out of the same office. You've probably never seen that because it's a scattered site community, 10 buildings in 8 different locations. Most of them kind of in the Parchman area. They're all in the city of Kalamazoo. And then one on Miller Road. Not sure how that got dispersed, but it's where they could find the land, I guess. New Village Park and Heather Gardens. If you remember New Horizon Village, right off of Gull Road, that they then became 2 separate properties because through the low-income housing tax credit process, we had to split it up in order to get the funding. And then Portage Pines was not actually developed by Lift Foundation. It's a senior property, 27 units right on Center Street. That was a property that the developer came to Lift and said, you know, can you take over governance for us? So Lift has overseen that ever since. I want to say since like 2008 or 2009.
So were these other properties developed through the same funding modalities that this one that you're proposing was as well?
No. Some of them, so the properties that are serving persons with a disability, that funding is through HUD. It's called a capital advance. So that's through Section 811 of the National Affordable Housing Act.
Okay.
Interfaith homes and neighborhood apartments were developed at the same time. Again, using funds from HUD, the funding process is no longer available because of the age of the property, but suffice it to say it was HUD funding. New Horizon Village and Heather Gardens, both of those properties were funded for renovation using low-income housing tax credits. So those are the 2 LIHTC properties that Lift has developed. Let's see. And then Portage Pines, they didn't develop it, but it was under Section 202 of the National Affordable Housing Act.
So the holdup or the expiration wasn't because of an indication of your past performance in managing or being able to oversee the project to success. It wasn't anything to do with that.
We didn't point well enough. We thought we were going to, but there's always a surprise that comes up with MSHA that you never knew about. So that's why we're taking extra time, because there actually is a funding application round in April of this year. But I don't think that gives us enough time to put together a really good, solid application that will point well. And we're going to be under the same QAP, the same kind of application process, because MSHA changes it like every 18 to 24 months. So we know it will be the same, and we think we're going to have a really good application. So I don't think I'd have to come back a 4th time.
Are you the one requesting the 18 months, or is that a procedural issue for the city?
Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, it is something that's been discussed, and because of the involvement of the funding sources for the project, and the work being done, to design the site.
Normally it's 12 months, right?
Yes, so they're normally, so variances expire in 12 months unless otherwise stated. So in this case, we're asking the board to otherwise state this is valid for 18 months.
Thank you.
Any additional questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Pete, would you like to take this opportunity for staff comments?
Sure. I think the board touched on a lot of the history here. Obviously, the reason this project, and the only reason this project is before the Zoning Board of Appeals, is due to the commercial zoning which occupies those parcels along the front of Stockbridge, and that's where the development is being located. So the majority land areas in the CC zone district, so those are the governing development standards that apply to any project. And because the CC zone district doesn't allow for residential units on the ground floor, this particular variance was before the board in February of 2019 and then again December of 2020 as they tried to align the funding for the low-income housing tax credits and other sources to get this project off the ground, in addition to the complications of the COVID-19 pandemic, which slowed and actually stopped the review of applications at the state for funding for a period of time. So, this project is now back on track. A revised site plan, preliminary site plan has already been presented to city staff, and they're working right now with stormwater engineers on laying everything out as far as how the infrastructure will be set up. So, it is something that is hoped, can get moved forward this fall for potential funding, which would allow, the actual material project to take off in 2023, is how Ms. Wilcott laid it out. So in the past staff reports have touched on the linkage with the mixed housing and the addition to the housing stock that this will provide. Obviously, this also aligns with the Edison neighborhood plan to create more affordable housing. And, staff will support it, for the same reasons we have stated, before, that this situation, does meet the intent. It is mixed use with the daycare in the front building, but there's really no, there's no market for that much additional commercial floor space in that area. And, if there was, there'd be all kinds of things going on across the street. So, for those reasons being stated, staff's in support of this use variance once again.
Thank you, Pete. I'd now invite any audience members wishing to speak in favor of the motion to please step forward. Seeing none, those wishing to speak in opposition, this is your opportunity.
I'm Richard Stewart. I'm a resident of the city of Kalamazoo since 1987. I reside and have a business in this neighborhood, Southtown neighborhood. The Southtown neighborhood was formed by the city in February 2015 of 599 parcels. The boundaries are Portage Street over to Burdick Street, Walnut Street down to Stockbridge. The city of Kalamazoo has decided that they will not, city staff will not include Southtown neighborhood, which has existed since that day, in the 23rd neighborhood in the city. There's 22. And they will not accept our Southtown neighborhood plan, which you have today at least 4 of us from the Southtown neighborhood. You've gotten emails, you've gotten, I believe, a letter. Our neighborhood unanimously opposes the destruction of these 10 parcels. This is in our Southtown neighborhood plan, this is our only natural green space. It is our only natural watershed and our only natural wildlife habitat. It's filled with deer and other wild animals that you're going to displace, and deer seem to be a concern to the city. You're going to displace them. Flooding is our primary issue, and it is known that these toilets explode in the area. I'm asking that you deny this applicant. I don't understand how the applicant's name is Housing Choices, who only owns 4 of the 10 parcels, although you have Lyft here doing a presentation that's not the applicant. The previous variance was approved, but things have changed. We have gotten the property added as a natural feature and protected. If that means something, it has changed. And if you were to develop our only green space into a 77-car paved parking lot and dispose of that water in the area that is currently our only natural wetland, would you want that next door? Well, you've got some people that live next door to it you're probably going to hear from. So I guess I am here to ask that you put a moratorium on any more variances to these 10 parcels until the city staff recognizes us, the Southtown neighborhood, and include us in these plans. Lisk refuses. Lisk uses the same property manager out of Portage to manage Interfaith Homes that will manage this property. They're trying to stop the commercial. It's more profitable if they don't put commercial.
Thank you. Is there anyone else?
Mr. Chair, I do have a layout which I'll put on the screen also, a top-down view of the site. But yeah, we can keep going with the public comment, but just to help answer questions as we go.
All right. I'm sorry, could you step up to the podium because it's impossible to hear you? Yep.
Hi, my name is Tina McClinton. I live in Kalamazoo.
Ms. McClinton, could you try to speak
I'm
into the...
sorry.
There
Hi,
we
my
go.
name is Tina McClinton. I live in Kalamazoo. I have lived in my home since 1985. I am one of the founding members of Southtown neighborhood. We have been trying to get the city to recognize this for 4 years now. I live on Lake Street, part of the neighborhood that now floods 2 to 3 times a year, the same neighborhood you want to build in. We flood, we are trapped by water. Storm drains in the street fill up with water, overflow into the street. Then our sewers back up, and it comes through the drains in our basements. But I don't get standing water in front of my house or in my yard because of this little green space that has a natural watershed, because this water traps us for 3 to 5 days in our neighborhood. Now you want to take away the last green space, which is 60% wetlands, 40% on a floodplain. It is a known flooding area. This space has a natural watershed, big trees, and lots of wildlife. Since this variant was originally approved, the same natural green space has been added to the NFP Natural Features Protection to try to protect it, because this helps us with flooding. Ever since then, our neighborhood has been targeted for high-density homeless shelter camp across the street at the old DHS building. If you're going to put the apartment somewhere, why take a green space away to put an apartment there? Why not build it at the old DHS building where you're not going to harm our homes anymore? Due to flooding issues, failed sewers, failed storm drains, we constantly flood. The first severe flood started in 2008. Then 2014 when they let the Morrow Dam loose. 2017 when KBCC Growing Field took away 12 acres of natural green space to build. We flood 2 times that year, 3 times in 2018, 2 times in 2019. 2020 and 21 we did not flood because we were in a drought. I have noticed that when developers come in, they build property up that makes their land higher than the area around us. This brings more water to the surrounding homes in the area as water goes to the lowest point, which becomes us. Then our homes and business are now under more water. This will set all the people that live in this neighborhood to flood even more. We have struggled to recover from the flooding. Is this really the way to treat any residents of the city of Kalamazoo? I agree we need homes for people, but I ask no variance be given. This is the last natural green space in this area, and we would like a moratorium issued on this site till Southtown neighborhood can have a chance to have a meeting with this potential developer. And I know a lot of my neighbors, there's 2 sitting here right now that did not receive a letter.
All right, thank you. Okay, anyone else?
Hello? Okay, there we go. If anybody else is from this neighborhood, feel free to speak up. I'm not from this neighborhood, but I have heard Southtown neighborhood in public comments for a long time. I listen to pretty much every single public meeting. I need to get a life, I know. But here, listen to this. This is interesting.
Mayor Anderson worked as a self-employed building contractor for over 20 years. In addition to serving on the city commission, Mayor Anderson serves as president of the Lift Foundation and as chairperson of the Kalamazoo County Public Housing Commission.
So the president of the organization is the guy that runs what the rules are in the city, asking not to follow the rules. He's asking for permission to work around the rules, and he's the guy that heads the group of people that make the rules. I know everybody watching this tonight, all 34 of them on YouTube right now, might not realize the irony in that. The guy that is in charge of everything housing in this community, instead of changing the rules, he's asking to work around them. He's asked over and over again, sending other people on his behalf. I just find it a little ironic. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Seeing no one else, are there any telephone comments?
No phone comments at this time.
All right, I will then close the public hearing and ask for a motion on the finding of fact.
I move that the finding of fact for location 210, 216, 220, 302, 302 rear, 308, 308 rear, and 316 Lake Street, 205, and 209 East Stockbridge Avenue shall include all information included in the notice of public hearing dated January 26th of 2022. 54 notices of public hearing were sent and 0 responses were received and are part of the record. A public hearing was held before the board and public comments were accepted. In addition to the information and documents contained in agenda packets, staff provided for this request, the Zoning Board of Appeals received 0 additional documents on the request. The finding of facts shall include those documents just described and also the facts and comments made during today's public hearing, which are summarized as follows. Applicant Lisa Wilcott of the Lift Foundation spoke on behalf of Kalamazoo County Housing Choices regarding a use variance to allow residential units on the ground floor of this property to better serve the community. They are still working on a site plan and securing tax credits. Richard Stewart spoke in opposition of the development due to natural features protections concerns. Ms. McClinton spoke in opposition due to flooding concerns. And another constituent shared concerns of the city possibly having a potential personal conflict of interest.
Thank you. Is there a second to the motion? Is there?
My apologies.
All right, thank you. This is our opportunity for discussion. Any discussion?
great deal of questions with how this actually originated. If we say that it's had very few changes to the applicant's process, but the last time this was done, there was no alleviation of flood concerns. The time before that, there was sizing requirements that needed to be adjusted. And the time before that, it was to meet the retail versus capacity on the first ground. If I've got my orders correct, it seems like we keep bending the rules one twist at a time to make this a possibility. And as much as I would like to encourage something, I find it very difficult to say, let's get rid of the last green space that obviously community members feel good about if we are just going to go one more tick over that line. So where did this start?
Mr. Chair.
Pete, do you want to address that?
Yes, thank you. Mr. Turpinning, it is the same use variance request before the board tonight that has been before the board previously, to allow for residential units on the ground floor. You are correct in that there has been some adjustments to this project over the years. I mean, when, the first iteration that came out had a connection from the parking lot all the way to Lake Street, and the improvements then migrated so that everything is outside the floodplain or almost outside the floodplain, as I showed in the layout. Let me bring that back up here. So the hatched area you can see wrapping around the site is the extent of the FEMA floodplain boundary. And there's been changes to the site layout to a modest degree to pull those improvements to the south out of the floodplain. As was mentioned by one of the speakers earlier, when the Natural Features Protection Ordinance was passed and the map was created, this area is mapped as an NFP area. And what that does is that increases the degree of review that's placed on removing trees, that's placed on, any sort of development that's near a body of water, or, there really isn't any slopes per se here, but there is a floodplain, there is little pond areas back there. So, so this latest version is taking into account those NFP requirements that the site is now under, as well as working with Eagle and FEMA to make sure that, what they're proposing can feasibly be built, with all the environmental regulations at the federal and state level, in addition to our local natural features protection ordinance. So, yeah, there have been some adjustments made to the site, but this particular use variance from the commercial zoning standards has been the same variance brought back now for the third time.
Thanks, Pete. So as I see it, the issue before us, the motion is fairly narrow. It's not for us to either approve or deny going forward on this project. We're being asked to grant a variance so that instead of having commercial along Stockbridge, which the zoning would require, we're allowing residential to be on the first floor. We've granted that on 2 separate occasions in the past, and I think the reasons in the past are still as valid today. I think when we've discussed this before, both on Stockbridge and on Portage, on Harrison Circle, some components of that discussion have been that there is not a heavy demand for commercial units on the first floor in these areas, that the zoning might be out of step with the needs of what residents are asking for by not having these businesses, not frequenting such businesses. and by developers saying that they can't build that because there's no demand for it. So in this case, I think we've also talked about the fact that there is a need in our community for more affordable housing, and that by not having, requiring developers to put commercial on the first floor here, we're making these projects more feasible for development and putting more affordable units out there. As we have in the past, I'll be in favor of this again tonight. Is there any additional discussion?
Mr. Just a point of clarification, are we still on finding of fact? Or are we discussing a motion?
Oh, I'm sorry.
I don't believe we approved the finding of fact just yet.
Oh,
I think I seconded.
We seconded, but
I
maybe,
seconded
did
it.
we not do a voice vote? I'm sorry about that. Let's back up. We have a motion and a second for the approval of finding of fact. All those in favor of the finding of fact, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
And opposed, same sign. Thanks, Pete. The motion on finding of fact carries. Now, before we've already started the discussion of this, but before we, continue with that, could you please put the motion in the record, Secretary?
Kalamazoo, sorry, start again here. I make a motion to pass the use variance from Chapter 4, Section 4.2, Q3 to allow residential dwelling units on the ground floor of each of the proposed apartment buildings, 60 residential units total, where retail or other commercial floor space is required on the ground floor. Please note this is a renewal of the same variance granted on December 10th, 2020, which has expired. This use variance will expire in 18 months.
Thank you. Is there a second on the motion?
I second.
All right, the motion is now on the table. Now we can continue with discussion.
I have a question. So with the site plan approval being expired, Pete, sorry, why are they before us with that being the situation?
Good question. Yes, the variance expired and the site plan that was previously approved in 2019 expired.
Okay.
So that brings them all the way back to the Zoning Board of Appeals to get this variance approved again tonight, and then they will proceed forward to site plan review and go through that process again with the plan. So it's, yeah, so all the prior approvals have expired.
Right, so they shouldn't be before us then before we have a site plan that we can speak intelligently to as it relates
Oh, I'm sorry, I answered the question wrong. So the reason it's done in this order is because if there's any special approvals needed, so if this was a request that requires, say, a special use permit from the Planning Commission, or in this case, it's a use variance from the Zoning Board of Appeals, those special approvals have to be in place before you can proceed with the site plan review process or proceed with getting permits if it's a project that doesn't require site plan review. So this is the first step, is any special approvals.
So then who's going to take into consideration the issue of the natural features protection?
Natural features protection is a step that's now built into the site plan review process.
I know.
Yeah, so that goes before the coordinator in our office, and if there's issues that are raised, then it will go to the Natural Features Protection Board, and they will look at it. So is that
I guess so, okay.
So the city has to raise concerns before it goes to the Natural Features Board? So the city gets to control the natural features?
There's several people that look at it. I don't know the whole of that, I mean, somebody from Public Services, from the water resource side, and then there's an environmental person that looks at it, and then we have a representative in planning and development.
So in your past experience, would the concerns of the non-existent South Town constituency be enough to escalate it to the board?
Well, there's a process the city has for establishment of neighborhood associations, and the constituency before us, has been advised that there's a process they can go through to create or propose to create a new neighborhood organization. So that's about all I have to add on that topic. I mean,
They have to create a new neighborhood organization
well,
to raise a concern
that
about.
geographic area is part of the Vine neighborhood and part of the Edison neighborhood.
Well, I wasn't speaking to that situation. I was being a little bit sarcastic, and I could rephrase it that would the concern of at least a half dozen people in our city be sufficient, whether they're recognized or not in their desired community name, be enough to bring this before the Natural Features Board?
That's a question that I will take back after tonight and, find out if, how that feedback is going to be handled.
I think it would be an easy yes when it's the last stand of trees in this neighborhood, and they've been expressing the concern for 4 years. But I'll give you a pass on that. Now, I have other comments. I'm voting no because I have too many concerns about this, but primarily I've never seen in my time on the board an 18-month request, or I don't know who requested it. I think Mr. Eldred said the city requested it, but all variances are 12 months. And we've had requests just like this before who have to get funding from another source that's difficult to get money from, and I've never seen that granted or requested 18 months. It's always been 12 months. So as the motion, that's why I did not second the motion, because I don't agree with the motion. I'll be voting no as it stands. If you change it to 12, I might change my mind. Mr. Eldridge, are you able to recall or provide to us the roll call votes on the previous variance? For this situation?
I'm able to look that up in the meeting minutes that were provided.
Could you? I would appreciate at least my vote. I think I was a no. While you're looking for that, I'll go on. I can understand the concerns of the South Town neighborhood. I am past president of the Arcadia Neighborhood Association, and we don't have a neighborhood plan either. This is anecdotal, and I don't have any proof, but it sure feels like we've not been recognized in developing a plan because we didn't play by the rules the city wanted. And that is they wanted us to include people into our neighborhood that traditionally have not been members of our neighborhood. On the other side of Arboretum Way, Walden Woods has been put in, and they were traditionally not a part of our neighborhood, and a number of apartments that have gone up as well. The city wanted us to speak for all of those people, and that's not what our community wanted to do. As it stands, Arcadia does not have a neighborhood plan on file, nor is anybody at the city concerned about it. So why is this germane? Because it's really not germane, but I'm trying to make it germane to this discussion. And that is if you were a recognized neighborhood, you'd have more of a voice, and you'd have a neighborhood plan that would speak to some of the issues that you have with this property. So I do think it's germane that you're not recognized in any way other than as an individual citizen, not even a citizens group. As soon as we started to identify items in our Arcadia plan for natural feature protection, 2 weeks later, WMU put up for sale one of the properties we had identified. They wanted their money at retail prices before we could ask for it to be made green space. There's no green space left. It's all BS. Everybody comes before this board and talks about green space. It never happens. Never, ever does it happen. To the spirit. Okay, we can say some lawn over here is green space, but it never happens to the spirit of green space. Excuse me. I think the natural features issue is something that we should get to the bottom of personally before. If this really is protected in the natural features plan, then I don't know why we're talking about putting a building up. I'd like for that issue to be resolved before I vote on this.
Also, I can sort of voice prejudice as the chairperson for the Pine neighborhood, because it does sort of encompass part of the neighborhood that we do currently exist in. The reason that I joined this board is because my front lawn now has a cesspool in it, because a local business was allowed to put a drainage pond in as opposed to under pavement water retention for drainage reasons, and that's why I became so vocally active in this. And as part of the neighborhood that I do represent, I understand that Southtown has appreciative pains with being recognized. However, I do also want to voice that you are still being recognized by the constituency that the Vine does offer. I will be voting no.
One other item I wanted to conclude with, and Chairman Lager is absolutely right. We have one decision to make tonight, and I'm pretty adamant about following what our job is up here, and our job is to talk about whether we should have ground floor dwellings on the ground floor, and I'll get to that in just a moment. But I remember not too long ago, we sat in front of this board, and the Natural Features Board representative came in front of us, and we had a 45-minute discussion about one tree. We had a 45-minute discussion about one tree.
With the consumers.
Yes, at the Bacchus property.
Yep.
Okay, now we're talking about an entire community and 10 parcels. I think there's a disconnect with the gravity of what we're trying to deal with on the natural features. So I want that solved before I'm going to vote yes on this, because it seems to me if it is protected or in some way in a different status, that I should understand that before I vote. And since I don't have that, I can't vote on whether we should be allowing ground floor units. When we've been talking about this for 2 or 3 years now, this is probably the 7th time that we've had this type of request, and still the city hasn't gotten around to changing the ordinance or addressing it.
And I would like to speak to that too. And I think just from our previous case tonight, what we're really trying to do, yes, it was about one tree, but really it was the spirit behind our philosophical bent and the tone in which we interpret these types of cases that are brought before us, and the ordinances, in the code, and all of the things, so that we can honor the heart of what our community really wants. This is in opposition, and I'm offended that the use of words like, low-income housing and using these different modalities to be able to create housing because we are in a housing crisis are being utilized to advance an agenda that it's of developing spaces for concentrated poverty. Actually, it's offensive to me, specifically because poverty is racialized and it's feminized in our community, and I just find this to be highly offensive. So I'm going to be voting no, and I think that just, as it relates to the ground floor, just the varying layers, just even listening to the constituency, the way that they have been ignored in terms of, it's constructed in a way that I can't respect. I'll be voting no. I don't need to go on.
Mr. Chair?
Yeah.
May I make a few comments? First of all, I did go back through the December 10th 2020 meeting minutes, and looks like that one was it was a unanimous approval for the use variance. Now, I don't know what happened in 2019. I don't have those meeting minutes in front of me. But what I want to mention here is we're straying from the topic at hand. This is a use variance for a requirement in this zone CC commercial zone that the ground floor level of buildings constructed has to be used for commercial purpose. And in this case, this development involves putting residential units on the ground floor level. So this project can go forward with commercial uses on the ground floor level of the two buildings, regardless of what the board says tonight. So let's, first of all, separate that out. Secondly, as I mentioned, you know, the oversight of this project is multi-tiered. So there's FEMA regulations, there's EGLE, which are, you know, the state of Michigan environmental regulations, and then we have our own natural features protection ordinance. Now, I am sorry I'm not, you know, I can't articulate the whole process that takes place other than, you know, that is now a step in site plan review, that everything that is in a, you know, NFP area gets kicked over to this side committee to be compared with the natural features protection ordinance. So, you know, there's all these, you know, regulatory hurdles that a project like this has to overcome. And there's many review steps that will occur after this meeting. So I didn't mean to set us, you know, going down a different path, but I want to kind of, you know, circle back and focus on, you know, what is the use variance for tonight, and, you know, what is the extent of that related to this project. I mean, there's already been the layout shown that the improvements are being proposed outside the floodplain. So.
Thanks, Pete. I'd like to take a step back, and I thank you for starting us on that process, Pete. Tonight, the motion before us is this, board members. Kalamazoo County Housing Choice is requesting a use variance. We're going to talk a little bit about use variance after I read this motion. From Chapter 4, Section 4.2 Q3 to allow residential units on the ground floor level of the proposed apartment building where, as Pete said, under the CC zoning district, zone, retail or other commercial is required. And then we all have this sort of yellowish manila folder in front of us. This has the standard that we've agreed to follow if we're going to decide a use variance. I'd like to take a second so that we could look at this together, please. Use variance. When granting a use variance, the Zoning Board of Appeals must ensure that the spirit of the ordinance is observed. What ordinance are we talking about? We're simply talking about the zoning ordinance. Not talking about NFP, we're not talking about things that are controlled by FEMA or MISHDA or LIHTC developments, or whether a neighborhood association exists or doesn't exist. We must ensure that the spirit of the zoning ordinance is observed, public safety secured, and substantial justice done. The board shall approve a use variance on a finding when there is competent material and substantial evidence in the record that all of the following standards are met. Let's take 1 second to go through these. Number one, the literal interpretation and enforcement of the terms and provisions of this ordinance would deprive the applicant for all practical purposes from using the property for a permitted use identified in section 4.1, that's the use table. Here what we're trying to do is answer the question of an applicant. Will we allow them to put residential on the first floor when CC requires commercial on the first floor? Please allow me to go through these. That's all right. So we're answering the question, would the literal interpretation of the enforcement of this ordinance deprive the applicant for all practical purposes for using it for permitted purposes? In the past, when we've addressed that issue, what we've talked about is the commercial reasonableness in an area like this where there is no demand for commercial uses, retail or office. The second one is there is an unnecessary hardship based on special circumstances or conditions that are peculiar to the land or structure for which the use variance is sought that is not applicable to other land or structures in the same zone district. Well, here in the CC district, we have what we're looking at here is a multifamily. So any multifamily in this is how we've interpreted this in the past, would have the same problem. There would be unnecessary hardship and special circumstances would be the lack of demand and the commercial unreasonableness of creating affordable housing in such a district, because multifamily isn't financially viable from what we've heard people say in the past when we put commercial when there's no demand on that. In this case, we do have some commercial in the form of a daycare. The special circumstances are not the result of the actions of the applicant. How we've interpreted that in these situations in the past is again going to that sort of market need, that there is no demand for commercial in these cases. Number 4 is the granting of the variance is the minimum action that will make possible the use of the land or structure that is not contrary to the public interest and that would carry out the spirit of the ordinance. Here we've said eliminating that need for commercial is actually in the public interest because it allows us to have more affordable residential in a community that needs more affordable residential units, and that it would carry out the spirit of the ordinance. I don't know that we've addressed that one specifically, but I might suggest that the spirit of the ordinance here is to allow some development to go forward that fits the character of the area. What we're looking at is a picture there, and I guess we have to ask ourselves, is the character of CC, that things have retail or commercial on the first floor, that it gives a visual sense, I suppose, that this is a viable commercial area. I think both having a daycare or childcare available there and sort of these architectural features that look fairly commercial with awnings and, blue glass and whatnot, things that the public or planning commission will probably talk more specifically about, does meet the spirit of what CC is looking for there. Number 5, the granting of the variance will not adversely affect adjacent land in a material way. Here we have to go back not to anything that is affected by this, but what the variance affects. Would it be any different, the adjacent land affected, whether there was residential or commercial on that first floor? And I think the answer is, by putting residential, no property near here will be adversely affected in a material way. And number 6 is the granting of the variance will be generally consistent with the purpose and intent of the ordinance. I think this is sort of cumulative of the prior ones, and I think again it goes back to these design features that we're looking at in this picture sort of meet the spirit of what CC, I believe, is looking for. Some visual elements of commercial viability with the special circumstances that commercial isn't actually as viable in this area as it would need to be to develop a property. So I think when we talk about this, it might be in our best interests, fulfilling our duties and responding to what the applicant has brought before us, to focus on these use variance elements rather than procedures or concerns that we might have about more general issues.
Can I understand how we are not addressing these 6 components of the framework that needs to guide our decision making? The granting of the variance will not adversely affect adjacent land in a material way. That's where the constituency has brought up the concern of the development in its totality, dismantling the last green space in their neighborhood. The granting of the variance will generally be consistent with the purposes and intent of this ordinance. To create opportunities for mixed-use space, we're in a commercial corridor, creates opportunities for economic development in a community that has been bridled with racialized poverty and feminized poverty, creating opportunities for them. The spirit of that ordinance was to create opportunities for people to be able to pursue entrepreneurship entrepreneurial efforts and businesses in their neighborhood that will propel them to be able to have the agency that they need to locate housing and identify housing in places that they wanted to choose, and would not be relegated to spaces that where there's commercial, for-profit, even nonprofit housing developments that, no. The granting of the variance is the minimum action that will make it possible that the use of land or structure is not contrary to the public interest, that would carry out the spirit of the ordinance. This is in opposition to the people that came here tonight, showing again the implications of how these impervious surfaces in the development will create more. Excuse me, too passionate. More flooding in their. Right, sorry. More flooding in their neighborhood. They you know, where they lived and they purchased homes and raised their families. I mean, I don't see how we're not acting, and I don't. The literal interpretation and enforcement of the terms of the provision of the ordinance would deprive the applicant, for all practical purposes, from using the property for a permitted. That's not what it's supposed to be, commercial down there. So why y'all putting housing down there? That's not what the spirit of it's for. So we are addressing these, and that's why you have some pushback, and we're being antagonistic to the request. In every single way, there's unnecessary hardship based on special circumstances. They've created their own special circumstances. They've created this because that's not what the intended use of the variance or the zoning is for. It's for mixed use, commercial in there, for the reasons that I've outlined previously. So every single layer of this is what has been addressed with with what we're opposing in terms of what this applicant has brought before us tonight.
We're not actually making a decision about the development itself, only whether we would grant a variance to the literal interpretation that would require commercial.
And I can speak to that, and I'd like to. I agree, Chairman Lager. I appreciate that you brought us back to the 6 requirements. And I'd like to emphasize that in our instructions, the word all is underlined in our instructions. There's no other underlining on this page. It says substantial evidence in the record that all of the following standards are met. So I appreciate you bringing us back to that, because I don't think we did that in the last meeting when we had our vote on this. I disagree with you, Remy, on number 5, but let me explain why, because it's as Mr. Lager has helped us with. And that is, the granting of the variance would not adversely affect the adjacent land in a material way. And I agree with Chairman that switching from commercial to residential or vice versa doesn't materially adversely affect the adjacent land in a material way. Okay, but I get your point. But speaking to number 1, the literal interpretation and enforcement of the terms and provisions of this ordinance would deprive the applicant, for all practical purposes, from using the property for the permitted uses identified. It doesn't. You can just do commercial on the bottom and use it the way the ordinance said. There's no depriving you of anything if you put commercial on the bottom. So it doesn't meet requirement number 1. I don't believe it meets requirement number 4. The granting of the variance is the minimum action that will make possible the use of the land or structure that is not contrary to public interest and that would carry out the spirit of the ordinance. Now, I'm going to get to the spirit, but it is not the minimum necessary needed to use the property for its intended uses. You can put commercial on the bottom and move forward, and you met the requirement. Doesn't meet this requirement in any way. And I want to speak to the spirit. The city keeps talking about live, work. What does that mean? That means I work where I live. But at every turn, and I shouldn't say that, I shouldn't be hyperbolic, at many turns, hyperbole, excuse me, at many turns we turn a blind eye to that, and we've allowed residential and commercial. So how are we ever going to get to a live, work if it's all live? It's a little bit chicken and egg, and I get the position the city's in. It's hard. What do you want, the egg first or you want the chicken first? But the spirit of the ordinance is live, work, so we should adhere to the spirit and make sure we have live, work. So I don't see it meeting number 1, number 4, or number 6. Thank you.
Pete, could I ask a question about live, work, and whether that's a special zone district or is that baked into every zone district?
That is, well, it's essentially allowed in almost every commercial zone district now. It's just the commercial community, the CC zone, has that restriction that it be pushed to the second floor and above if you're going to add residential units. So, but what I wanted to say is, and maybe we rolled over it a little quickly, I mean, there is a large daycare center in the front building. So it, you know, it's a portion of the front building that does have a commercial use in it. And obviously there's the potential in the future that as this area grows, there could be other, you know, those residential units on the ground floor could transition to more commercial uses. But, you know, what the applicant's proposing is, you know, the daycare center and then residential units in the front building, and then the back building, all residential on the ground floor. But we just have to be careful we're not getting too deep into the site plan review process. You know, and secondly, we have to, you know, be mindful that this is the same variance that came before the board in 2019 and came before the board in 2020. And, you know, that is, you know, if it's difficult to identify circumstances that have really changed, because the buildings are still the same buildings with the same number of units proposed. I did mention there was some site improvements that had been shifted from further north to the south, closer to Stockbridge. But as far as the characteristics of what the use variance was for in 2019 and 2020 and before us today, you know, that has not changed.
I'd concur, Mr. Administrator, but what has changed are board members and board members' views and interpretation of the situation.
Well, as we stated at the beginning when I read the procedures for tonight's meeting, as chair, I have the privilege to ask questions of people that have spoken before or the applicant. Ms. Willicott, if I could.
I call the question.
Ms. Willicott, I think that you might not have gone into as much detail because you might not have anticipated some of the places this conversation has gone tonight. And so there's been a suggestion that the literal interpretation and enforcement of the terms and provisions of the ordinance would deprive the applicant for all practical purposes for using the property for a permitted use identified. And so I think that what I'm would like to know about that is, why is it that you'd rather put residential in the first floor than commercial in the first floor here?
So primarily the reasons that were stated is that commercial spaces aren't being used. I mean, I have a building next door to my office and there hasn't been a car in the parking lot in over a year and a half. I think it's also important to note that there were 2 buildings constructed on this site where we're going to be building. We're not going to be removing very many trees at all because there was a house that we removed, and then there was a bar that was there for years, and the foundation is still there, the concrete is still there, and mostly it's a parking lot that when I drove by today, I noticed the beauty shop that's going to be right next door to us is plowing the land there and using it as a parking lot. So the portion of the property that we're developing, I mean, it's being done so in response to the neighbors and the neighbors' needs, because at one point, and I don't think you saw the plan at this point, there were 5 buildings and they went all the way to Lake Street. So all of the changes that were made by the developer were done in response to the neighbors and in order to make sure that there wasn't additional flooding. That whole flood zone will be untouched except for a walking path.
Thank you. Does anyone else on the board have a question for Ms. Willicott? No?
Okay.
Thank you, Ms. Willicott.
Thank you.
Is there Is there any further discussion that the board would like to have, or have we exhausted ourselves?
I think out of respect for all citizens, I don't have the privilege of offering Mr. Stewart the floor.
Thanks. All right, I'll call the question. Let's have a roll call vote.
We'll start with Mr. Turpinning.
No.
Carroll.
No.
Lager.
Yes.
Vanden Hamburg.
Yes.
Doan.
Yes.
Harrington.
No.
The motion does not pass. All right. I think our next agenda item tonight, Pete, I don't seem to have the full agenda in front of me. Is the next agenda item election of officers?
Next agenda item is the election of officers.
All right.
And that is, and that is something that doesn't need, we don't need to do a roll call vote, we just need to do a voice vote on the, either one at a time or the slate of candidates, however the board would like to do that.
So I think that by email today, Pete had sent a potential slate, and that was Jeff Carroll to move into the chair position, and I, Matt Lager, would move into the vice chair position, and Christina Doan would be in the secretary position. If that slate is acceptable to people, would someone like to make a motion on that slate?
I'd like to make a motion on the suggested slate of candidates for the board as stated.
Is there a second?
I second.
All right, let's do a voice vote on that. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And opposed, same sign. Motion carries. That's our new slate of
Great.
officers.
Could I make one request?
Yeah.
As the new chairman next month, is the finding of fact is very difficult for everybody. In fact, I know one ZBA board member, former ZBA board member, who quit because he just couldn't handle it, and it was a difficult situation. I concur. I was hoping that whether it's just written instruction or tutelage or I don't know what the city could offer us in terms of education on the finding of fact, but I personally struggle with putting opinion in it. I've tried to be very focused and only putting facts in it, but I noticed we put a lot of opinion in it and a lot of non-germane issues. I'll give you an example. It'll bring economic activity to the neighborhood. That's opinion. That's not fact. And I would just appreciate some education for all of us if we could get it. And the second thing is I appreciate that the city provides feedback on, like they do, they go through the requirements, the 6 requirements, and they tell us their opinion of a certain application, and then they provide a recommendation. And, the sassy part of me says, well, why am I here if the city's going to tell us what they recommend? And then, the calmer person in me thinks, well, I've got a brain and I can vote and I can do the research and I'm a big boy. I can vote as need be. But I wonder if other boards are receiving, both in Kalamazoo and or other places in the United States, recommendations from the municipality. Otherwise, just feels like so I'd like to put it this way. Maybe we could get to the bottom of my question by saying, what is the correlation between city recommendation and the status of approval or not approval on a variance? So if we vote 100% of the time with the city, it's a little concerning to me. And I don't know that we need to speak to that now in this meeting, but as the new chairman, I wanted to raise that concern that we're a rubber stamp. And I think you can tell by my personality I'm not, but others may be. have that concern. Thank you, all of you, for your support and confidence in me.
Okay.
Thanks.
Would now be an appropriate time to speak a little bit to the staff?
Yeah, go ahead,
To address
please.
what you said. I understand your concern, Jeff, because a little bit to the back of my mind, I kind of thought that, but I also, I'm grateful to have that. And there was a period of time when I was a new board member where I thought about resigning because I didn't have that. And my background is in education and driving around. I mean, I just didn't feel like I felt like the weight of the world was on my shoulders. And I was just driving around and trying to figure out things on my own or call Pete all the time. And then a part of me was like, well, we're not supposed to be chummy friends. We're, so I mean, I appreciate what Pete sends, and I don't feel that I have to go along with anything. I just see it as a nice, the benchmark, something.
Informational.
Yeah.
My point was that I'd like to make sure that's the intent and how we use it, not as a decision maker for us.
Right.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chair, if I could chime in.
Yeah, please.
Mr. Carroll, that's a very healthy discussion. First of all, the finding of fact, yes, we can go over that again. We could do that next month and go over, the most efficient way to carry out the duty, of recording the finding of fact. So I'm glad you brought that up. There's never a bad time to do additional training. So, and then secondly, I don't want the board to ever feel like they're just following the staff report. But what you have to remember is we get requests to do development projects every day. And a lot of those projects are way outside the bounds of the ordinance. And we sit down with those folks and we talk to them about the reality of what the ordinance is and what they're trying to fit in on say a small piece of property. And those are the type of cases that don't end up in front of you, because we work with folks, we try to get them to understand, hey, maybe you need to buy the property next door so you have a little more land area to fit all of what you want in. And then all of a sudden it's a conforming project. The Zoning Board of Appeals never sees it, never hears about it. But, we do work with applicants, as much as we can to make these projects successful. And if there's ways, things they can modify on their design or add a little more property to meet the ordinance and not have to go to the Zoning Board of Appeals for a variance that staff's going to have a tough time supporting, then we work with them to find alternatives. So I don't want the board to look at it and say, well, why did we just grant everything that was on the agenda? The staff reports are much more robust than they used to be. We try to tie in the master plan, the strategic goals of the city commission, and we even look at neighborhood plans now. I've made several references to the Vine neighborhood plan. So, staff has definitely branched out and digs deeper for information before these meetings than we did in past years. And I hope, that's realized also.
Absolutely, and that's why I started with it. I'm grateful, and thank you for the background work, and thank you for putting my mind at ease and telling us about that. I appreciate it. And
Chairperson, if I could, I'd like to expand just a little bit on what Pete has said. First of all, you were asking if other communities do that. I can tell you that they do. I have represented other communities. I've served in this capacity in other communities. I had the same role in Portage for many years, and I know other communities do that. One of the functions of this board is to review decisions of the city planner on the zoning ordinance. And in many cases, what is coming before you in the staff report is what that recommendation or that interpretation is. And it's up to this board as a quasi-judicial body, not a court, but something tending in that direction, to review it and decide based on the standards set out by law, by ordinance, or by statute, or both, whether that is a correct decision or not based on the facts that are presented to the board. So it isn't intended to be, and your charge isn't to be just a rubber stamp there. You are to review that and evaluate it. Now, that's part of the information given to you, and they give you a lot of background information. So that is useful, whether you agree with their opinion or whether you don't. But certainly I agree with Pete that we can provide you with some additional guidance on the finding of fact. I think reviews of what your role is and how to go about it, periodic reviews and training is always appropriate and helpful.
I appreciate that.
We are here, and in part, and my role is here to represent this body and see that you have the information and knowledge that you need, excuse me, to make appropriate decisions.
I appreciate that.
Can I ask something to you, Counselor? So I appreciate what you brought up, Jeff, because I think that it's just like with American Idol, you know, like they had judges on American Idol, but American public, they voted for the winner of American Idol. And so people raise that question the same way. You know, even my analogy right now creates an accessibility to the constituency so that they can interpret, you know, what we're even discussing right now in terms of the leanings of city staff and how that correlates to what our representative roles are on the board and how we interpret the ordinances and the constituent voice and reflect those things as we interpret whether or not we want to grant variances for the Zoning Board of Appeals. And so it's through that lens and through that scope, right, that we expand access to the democracy. Would you agree with that? Or what's your position on that? Like, I appreciate him raising that. And I also appreciate Pete's perspective and everybody else who's a part of the Planning and Economic Development Department as it relates to how they choose to execute their jobs. I appreciate the opportunity to be in a constituency and a voice through an appointed board from the City Commission where I can raise up, again, analogies like bringing in American Idol or anything else that I've set up here. I think that it creates a space for expanding accessibility for people that historically may or may not be participating in this. Like the young man said earlier, right? Right? When he said the 36 people that are on YouTube, if we start talking in ways and communicating in ways that, I mean, it's, what can you speak to that? Is that?
Well, the role of Zoning Board of Appeals is maybe a little more limited than what you're talking about. But what you're talking about when you're talking about a variance, are there circumstances that exist that merit an exception to the zoning ordinance? So you're looking at the dimensional variances, the condition of the property, for example. Use variance, and had discussion of that tonight. Again, is that a use that technically is appropriate under all the circumstances? Can the property actually be used for that, or is some other use appropriate, and the various other conditions that? So again, you're looking at making exceptions to the zoning ordinance when you're talking about variances. And is that appropriate? And in many instances, it may not be, but there are certainly instances where it may be. I think what Pete is saying is that his department and part of his role is to do some screening of that. If things are just so obviously inconsistent, you aren't seeing those.
Good. So Pete had his annual report in the package. I would encourage everyone to look at that. It's provides interesting and useful information for us. And so if you didn't have a chance to look at that yet, because you were looking at the cases themselves, it's good information. Thank you, Pete. And I think unless there's any other topics, we are adjourned. Yes. Yes. Yeah.